Dolores, you're all set. Thumbs up.
Thank you, Miss Kim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Wait another minute.
She said, yes, she's planning to join.
Okay. Well, we'll start. I thought it was really important to be able to put a process in place in regard to the consideration of accepting Lake McIntosh shares and to have a process by which to do that upon both councilor's recommendation and the mayor pro tem. So basically that's what this workshop will be dealing with. Other than that, I don't have anything to add. Councilor, could you please set forth the procedure that we're going to follow tonight?
Yes, Mayor Angela, thank you. So what I have done is I've prepared for you a draft of a policy that myself, Aaron, and Victoria worked on together to put together. Tonight's workshop is about really going through that policy we've drafted. It is not with concern any property, any potential development of any particular individual. We're not going to be taking public comment tonight on this. And it's important to focus on what it really is. It is a process. It's not about the definition of economic development or low-income housing or any of those things. It's really just a process by which the town collects information from an applicant and evaluates that information. And I think, what I plan to do is kind of walk through it. But what I would like from the board to, provide feedback on is particularly the documentation. We put in here that certain documentation is going to be required for applications to receive permission to use these shares. And, we're just doing our best on guessing what documentation might be useful to the board. But if there's other types of documentation which the board feels would be useful to evaluate these types of applications, we certainly would want to know that, because what we plan on doing is taking this policy, promulgating, but also establishing an application form that incorporates a lot of this information. And so that's, kind of what our plans are going forward. And if it's okay with the board, what I'll probably do is I can share my screen and we just kind of walk through the policy step by step, if that's okay with everyone.
That's fine.
Okay, let me try and do this. Okay, I already have it up. Screen share. Okay, can everyone see the Word document on my screen?
Yes. Better.
Excellent. Yeah, I can make it bigger even if you need me to.
There you go.
That's,
That's
so
good.
the first part of this is just, the prefatory language that, the third amendment to the IGA with Longmont enabled us to accept Lake McIntosh share water for new service connections added for, affordable housing, commercial development, economic development. And then, referencing, we were able to, promulgate policies pursuant to the town code. And this is, to be very clear, this policy is, meant to be amended from time to time. It's unlikely that we can get this maybe 100% correct on the first go. And so just so the board is aware, just because we were, hopefully in the future promulgate this via resolution, doesn't mean we can't go in and tweak it if turns out we learn more about what's useful and what's not. So that's just something to keep in mind. The next thing I did was I went back and looked at the IGA, including all the different amendments to it. And I just incorporated some of the definitions into this document, because I don't think most developers have access or readily access that document. And so I incorporated the definitions for affordable housing, commercial development, economic development opportunities. This workshop, once again, is not to really debate what further clarification those definitions might be, but just so everyone knows, is I did not create these definitions. They came directly from the IGA. And then,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is
Yep.
it the IGA with Longmont overall, or specifically as it relates to water?
it's the water service IGA is what we're talking about. So these definitions come from the IGA for treated water service, including additional ones we mentioned earlier, which were in the third amendment. Also the Lion service area and service connection, which were in the first IGA, that are referenced in the third amendment, and I just put them here for ease of use. And then really the meat of this discussion, I think, is about talking about, the process by which we would accept an application to use Lake McIntosh share water. And the way I envision this working would be that an applicant would submit a written application to the town, and that application would have certain, minimum documentation requirements, no matter what type of, definition they were trying to fall under, whether it be economic development, affordable housing, or economic development opportunities. That every application would have these shared things. And this is kind of what the list I've come up with. And once again, I'm really looking for feedback if there's anything else that the board would think would be useful to include that. But, the basic stuff like name and address of both the applicant and the proposed development, a narrative description, size, number of taps, some sort of description of what the planned uses are, the current zoning, maps, and then any sort of drawings, renderings, and plans they may have. Is kind of what we thought would be useful for every type of application, no matter what it might be. And does the board have any feedback or any thoughts on whether additional documentation would be needed for every type of application?
Mayor, I've got, if he wants comments on that portion now, I've got.
I think, yeah, I was planning on just kind of walking through it piece by piece, but if we'd rather go through the whole thing first and then do that, and I'm open to the board feel.
My comment on the second bullet point there, I think that could use a little clarification or supplementation or something like that. I think if a current landowner has a proposed project to improve their property or maybe improve it and sell it to somebody else, whatever, and they want to come forward with that, that's fine. I mean, they're obviously authorized, but if someone other than the current landowner, like a potential developer who's got it under contract, but hasn't closed yet, wants to come forward, I think they should have to at least get to the stage of having the property under contract. What in the language there's a little fuzzy, because somebody who's potentially going to buy property is not necessarily an agent of the property owner. I mean, they're the other party to a contract. And so one thing I'd like to avoid there is some kind of, is the staff and the board spending a lot of time doing what are basically advisory opinions. If somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about making an offer for such and such a property in town, and I might want to turn it into a retail shop or a restaurant or whatever. I don't think staff time, which is valuable, and board time, which is also valuable, should be spent on that until they have some kind of tangible interest in the property, at least a contract in the form of an option to buy. I'm not saying they have to close on it first. You shouldn't make them do that, but I think we might need to tie that down a little bit more, where it's either the current owner or someone who's got at least a contractual interest in the property. That would be mine.
So if maybe in the addition would be is if the applicant is not an authorized agent of the property owner, then they have to show some sort of property interest, tangible property interest, and the property to be developed. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, I can add that. I'll add it in red so everybody knows.
I would suggest you had to do it right now, but this is first draft really. So
Anyone else, while I'm doing this, anyone else have any other kind of feedback on this initial list? That would be common to all applications.
I have a question. Can
Yeah,
you hear me? Oh, good. So under the bullet narrative description of the proposed development, what do you see being included in that? And I ask because there's also a bullet called description of the type of uses planned for the proposed development.
Yeah, I think when I say uses, I mean, it's more of the technical zoning term about what it falls, what category it falls within. And then the narrative description being more so just like, tell us about what your project is, in more general terms. So it may be, your uses may be light industrial, but your description may be, we're assembling bicycles, and here's what we're planning on doing.
Got it. Thank you.
It's like Trustee Wall has his hand raised.
Oh, go ahead, Trustee. Well, it's a workshop. You can just talk.
Yeah. So, I think this list is great. I just want to make sure that it corresponds with other like bits of information that are asked for through the process so that an applicant can cut and paste. We're asking them for the same information. So if I'd just like to ask staff, is it called a narrative description of a proposed development in other documents throughout the town process? I'd just like to make sure that those are consistent. It's going to make it a lot easier for applicants. The other thing that I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Browning, we don't want to get a whole bunch of, people, what if. What has kind of caused this is one of those scenarios though. And until the town board or the town has a track record, I think we need to make some type of concession or make ourselves open to the first couple of these so we can establish a track record that developers don't need to come to us proactively in order to do some of those. So I just throw that out. I mean, that's not necessarily in this process, but maybe in the overall approach to this, until we have that track record, I don't think it's fair to say you can't come to us with an idea and see if, just like this applicant has, because I think I think we're all learning a lot about where the lines are, what could definitely fall within some of these. And I think that's going to be important.
Madam Administrator,
Yes.
doesn't the capability exist for anybody to come to you and have a preliminary meeting with
Oh,
you
sure.
in regard to that? And so then you could advise them of this process further, but you could answer a lot of questions for them.
I can certainly try to answer questions and clarify policy with them. Like example, this first application you had, I simply didn't know where the board would land on it. So I don't, I'm always clear to say it's the final decision's up to the trustees, but here's the policy. And I can certainly help clarify or help them fill out the application for questions such as, the difference between a narrative and a type of use. So yeah, absolutely. Usually they do start at our level, but because they have to ask the clerk to be on the agenda too. So.
Okay.
I have a question on the fifth bullet there. Is it standard operating procedure to ask any applicant what their projected annual usage is? So if I were building a single residential home on a lot, I would have to tell you what my projected usage would be?
No, we know what the average usage is in a residential. It's if it's commercial, especially. But it just helps us to estimate how many shares of water they'll need because a share has a projected number of gallons associated with it.
Yeah, 325,000 or something. But is that a stumbling block for a developer? Is he going to be able to actually estimate what his
Well,
annual usage would be?
You know, it's
Could
very
I
different.
step
between
it, just that it is something that's become more important. In particular, you all had the hotels, let's say, discussed. And so if we're talking about hotels, we do want to ask them to propose what do they think that's going to be, and doing research on that and finding out. Some will say 100 gallons per room per day. So we would want them to have some idea, and whether or not that needs to come further down in the process, that may be part of it. But just to put it out there that I think we do want to try to get some ideas from the applicants what their usage will be, so we have an understanding of what we're looking at.
Okay.
Well, and I think that also sets kind of an expectation for the developer because, you know, they may not have a really good understanding of water and how much an acre foot really is, you know. So if you have someone planning a car wash, you want to make sure they've thought through, you know, what they're thinking their business plan is going to be versus someone with a retail store with one toilet. So it's I think it's kind of a check and balance to each other of what we're thinking, because we also have a maximum daily limit and an annual limit of what we can use for water.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kenyon.
But in practice, the town ultimately determines the water requirement,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of estimate or
Correct.
projections of the applicant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When you pull, as it shows later in the policy, when you pull the building permit is when the final determination is made. But I think the board should probably have the information of how much water, how many shares of Lake McIntosh we're talking about, and this information is necessary to determine that. But once it's just a projection, it's not, you're not tied to that number necessarily. It's just to give the board an idea as to how many shares are we're talking about.
Excuse me.
All right, so that's the, I guess the shared, what I call the minimum documentation standards. And then after that, we kind of walk through the different types of properties and what documentation we require for them. The easiest one is affordable housing, because there's a pretty good definition of affordable housing in the IGA, in the Third Amendment to the IGA. And it's pretty explicit that it's income restricted housing. And so, you know, the first thing we're going to need to determine whether or not it's affordable housing is income restriction or some sort of intent to income restrict the development. You know, as we saw at the summit, housing development, you know, a lot of these things are supported by affordable housing credits. So we'd be interested in see, you know, what those are, if any. There is the ability to do both rental and for sale units under the definition. And that's all based upon area median income for the Boulder Longmont area. So we would just like to see what the rental rate or what the for sale rate is in relation to that area income for at the time that the application is submitted, of course. I'll scroll down. And then I put this in every single one of the individual categories, but any other information the applicant believes will assist the board, just so it's kind of open that if there's something else that the applicant would like us to know, they would be able to have given the opportunity to have that be considered by the board. is there any questions on affordable housing qualifications? Yeah, I think that one's the most straightforward one of the categories that Longmont has established. The next one is commercial development, which is a little more, less defined, in the definitions we have from the Third Amendment. It seems actually pretty wide open, in my opinion, the way it exists now. And so what I determined, what I thought might be a good thing to know is, of course, the description of the goods and services intended to be offered, because it is based on commercial activity. For instances where, the developer may not be directly offering those goods and services, where it's a rental, situation for either office space or, retail space, any letters of intent from potential tenants, just to show that there is going to be that commercial activity. And then once again, any sort of kind of wide open, any information which the applicant thinks will be useful. And so this was a little bit harder to peg down for me, but this is what I guess might be useful to the board. But why we're doing this is I'm open to suggestions on additional documentation which might be useful for the board. Okay, moving on to economic development opportunities, which is, kind of even more open than commercial even. And this one, the only thing I could really pin down from the existing definition is, we basically need a projection of increased production, employment, or distribution of goods and services, which I understand may be hard to do. But what the definition says is that the project must enable greater production, increased employment, or better distribution of goods and services. So we need some sort of, quantifiable showing of how you will do that. And I think this may be hard to do potentially, especially things like, distribution of goods and services. How do you measure that? But it's the best I could come up with when I thought about it. But if there's anything else the board thinks would be useful to determine this, that I'd be happy to hear that input.
Have you considered tax revenue as one of those criteria?
That's one thing I was thinking about. I think it may be hard to project in a lot of cases, especially if it's a situation where you are renting office space, but I can certainly add that. And I mean, I think it's going to be a heavy lift in a lot of situations. It's something I definitely played with for both commercial and for economic development opportunities. But if the board wants it in, I'm happy to put it in. I was just worried about how difficult it might be to project that out in some situations.
I do think, though, that most people who have a business plan are going to know what they're projecting for sales. And from that, we can extrapolate sales tax data for those that it pertains to.
And what would be the time frame horizon which would be useful for that? 3 years, 5 years? Or is it annual?
I think you have to go annual, just knowing that some businesses don't survive past that, I mean, I think you have to go into this knowing that's a potential.
And does the board feel that information is useful for both commercial and economic development opportunities?
Well, isn't that the point, though? Isn't that the point of economic development?
It's not the only point.
Well, I understand that, but it's certainly a key point when considering economic development.
I think it's, oh, sorry, Kenyon.
I think it's, I agree it's a good measure and it's something that's very tangible. And, I like to have very quantitative measures, but, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but, I understood Longmont said we can define it however we want for this. So, that's great that this is what the IGA says, but we have directly from Longmont, we can define it however we want. And if
Well,
that's
within, as long as it wasn't completely outside the scope of what the IGA says. So the IGA had their very broad definition.
Right.
And you couldn't put in there, it was residential.
Right.
Something
So-
like that. As long as you fit that, yes.
Okay, fair enough. So, but they also said in that correspondence that they consider mixed use of any kind to be economic development.
Or I guess I would say so, because that's what mixed use by definition seems to me, and I haven't looked at it. They were really saying, no, they believe they encourage mixed use. And so for them, mixed use is beneficial, and they like to see mixed use.
I understood it as they said that it was economic. They would classify that as economic development if somebody came to them in Longmont.
What I understood them to say was that if Lyons considered mixed use to be economic development, then Longmont basically wouldn't have a problem with that. If they were going to defer to us, and if that's what we thought, then that was okay with them.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to get clarification. I thought they said that it had been. And I agree. I think taxes is great. It's one criteria, but it can't just be limited to that, in my opinion.
I think we ought to go ahead and put in all kinds of taxes. I think we ought to put the annual sales tax, property tax, and any use tax, which tends to be upfront. Might as well cover them all if we're going to cover one of them.
And does the board feel that should be the case for both commercial and economic development, or just economic development?
Why don't you speak first, Trustee Rogan? I know you've wanted to for a little while.
Thanks, Mayor. So I agree that measuring sales tax is a great way to determine how much economic benefit there might be. But I'm thinking about, say a developer comes in and wants to do a project, but doesn't know who their tenants would be or necessarily what the business would be. They wouldn't be able to project any sales tax. So I think here we're kind of assuming that the developer is going to be the same person who's going to be operating the commercial enterprise. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily true.
That was my point earlier about how that's why I didn't put it in initially, is I was envisioning there might be lots of those instances. But I think so long as that we all understand that there may not be any sales tax, I mean, there would certainly be property tax, that this wouldn't be disqualifying, basically. If you couldn't project out sales tax and you don't know who your tenants are going to be, this would not be in and of itself disqualifying.
That's right. That's a good point.
Along those lines of sales tax and how you measure it is, if mixed use development has 7 businesses downstairs, so there's people there, and then there's living upstairs, and they bring their friends to town, and they're buying lunch, they're buying drinks, they're buying whatever. Well, they're increasing sales tax, just not that particular developer building the building or making the adjustments. So I agree with Kenyon Wall that it's a small piece, but it does need to be looked at some point, because bringing people in, bringing businesses in, they employ people. They will spend money in town, and we get sales tax from that. So as long as the future boards looking at this know that sales tax, as Trustee Rogan said, just that specific sales of a sold item, now may not be the perfect measure, it may cause a problem, but if we can make sure it's looked at in a broad way, it is one of the tools or one of the bullet points we need to look at.
This is Mark. Something else I just thought of on that line, and not for discussion tonight, but basically a kind of a research point for maybe staff or me or Brandon or somebody is, I don't guess I know how Boulder County the Boulder County tax assessor values mixed use property for tax assessor purposes. The commercial property tax rates have gotten so exorbitant the way the Gallagher Amendment worked in Colorado, while residential rates have been capped. How exactly do they do the mix between a projects that's part commercial on the ground floor and residential up above? How do they parcel that out? Because when we're going to be, our future boards are going to be assessing how much economic development is this going to bring, that's important information for us to know. How heavily is it going to be taxed? That's just kind of a note to self or staff or something. Let's figure out how that tax assessment gets done, because I don't know. I can't tell you.
I think that's something that should be researched immediately. Can we do something like a sales tax projection, if available, if known? I mean, that is so hard to quantify.
Yeah.
That is really a difficult situation, and I don't want it to be something that can even get close to costing somebody a development. We don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. You don't know. Technically it's based on, it's always been based theoretically on the value of inventory and how many times you turn it per year. But, we're in a situation that we don't have any idea what brick and mortar is going to do in today's day and age. So that's a really difficult proposition, and I'm sure that's why you gave consideration to leaving it out, Counselor. That's a tough one.
That's exactly right. That's why I didn't originally put it in, because I was unsure about how difficult it would be. But I hesitate to put in if known, because everyone would just say then, well, we don't know, and not provide it.
Well, I was just trying to think of something, but it's probably best, to be honest with you, just like you did, to just leave it out. But I'll go with any direction the board wishes to proceed. But that's a tough one.
So I guess, really the question is there's two parts, right? This is what we're asking of the applicant. And then later in the document, we talk about how we're going to decide. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's, we can say, give us everything you've got, and we're going to base our decision on these things. And if you can't decide, don't worry, you're out. If you're going to say, I'm going to bring, $11 million a year in sales tax revenue, you can give us, you don't even have to give us Lake McIntosh shares. We'll get out of your way. But, that whatever it is, I think, that's the difference. We can ask for whatever they have. And if they fill out not applicable or not known, that's fine. But I think we need to be really clear in the decision process that just because you don't have all these things, or we're going to make our decision based on all that. And that's why we asked for all these things.
Okay, so are we fine leaving it in, I guess, for now? I mean, I think there's going to be some sort of, in the application form, if something can't be filled out and someone puts not applicable or not known, then I think we all understand that that's not disqualifying in and of itself.
I think that's right. And if we need to tweak it in the future, we'll do so.
Okay. So the next part of this is just the time frame for review. First, we thought they should go to the town administrator. The town administrator, reviews for completion, essentially. If it's incomplete, it's rejected and sent back in writing saying, this is incomplete for these reasons. Please, fill it out correctly, and we'll consider it then. Once it's determined to be complete, then it gets moved on to the town clerk, who places it on the agenda. And so I just wanted to establish some sort of certainty for review timeframes on the administrative side. And this is pretty similar to how other types of applications work, like wireless applications, for example. And so that's kind of what I was modeling off of when I wrote this. And I spoke with Victoria, and we thought that the 30 days was appropriate based on her workload and her staff's workload. Next comes the fun part, which is how the board will consider an application. A lot of this is informing the applicant how to work, but the idea is that we're going to have a public hearing, essentially. Although it's not a public hearing per se, it's supposed meant to operate like a public hearing, where the applicant comes in, staff gives a presentation of what application materials have been submitted to the town. And we can submit a recommended decision if we so wish. And then the applicant will be permitted to give a presentation on, why they believe they should get Lake McIntosh shares, Public testimony will be taken, and this is something I wasn't sure whether the board thought was appropriate for there to be public testimony on this or not. But I think, it's better to give more rights to the public initially than take them away than the other way around. And then the applicant, if you're going to give public testimony, the applicant needs the opportunity to rebut that, what the public says. So we added that in. And then essentially what we're going to have is a recorded vote. And then we thought, something Victoria and I talked about is that on the application itself, there should be a line saying what the board's decision was. I got basically a blank. And so that way it can be recorded what the decision was in the vote, and then it could be recorded in the file. As we were worried that it may be the situation where time goes by and we forget what the decision was. And it's better to have better record keeping built into the process than have to go searching, maybe many years later. And so that was kind of the idea behind that one. The decision of the board is not appealable. Really, I think the only way this could be appealable is through district court process. We didn't think there should be like a secondary, rehearing or anything on a decision. The applicant may, however, submit a new application, and that should be a new, not an. If there's some sort of material change in the application. I didn't know if we want to put standards on this or not, as kind of debating what sort of standards would make sense. But I think whenever you try to say, well, if it's changed 10% or 15%, it's really difficult to know what that means because you can't really quantify that, the degree of which development changes. I don't think in most cases, as we've seen in the development plan process, what does 10% change of a development plan mean? I don't think anyone really knows. And so I hesitated from putting some sort of standards on this, but that was kind of the idea. And I think to Trustee Wah's point earlier, if you want to create criteria by which the board must decide, I think this is the place to do it. Usually hesitant to do that, to put too much specificity in how decisions are made. But if we would like to do that, this is definitely a place where we'd want to insert it into the process.
I don't know how specific we can get. I agree, but I think that somewhere in here we should be referring to some reference document, planning document, whether it be the comp plan, the then current, what have you plan. I think a little bit more specifically, and maybe if that's and the applicant has to say their criteria that they're basing it on is based on this part of the comp plan or the flood recovery plan or whatever it is, just so that, we're using these documents. I mean, we're talking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on creating these documents. I think that we should use them, and we should either ask the applicant to align with them, or we should be making decisions based on them. So like I said, I don't know exactly how I can propose that, but that's kind of my feeling. Let's give some people something to work, some guidelines to work within that we're investing in and getting public input about the kind of town we want to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the comp plan would play into this. So I had to think about.
If it's commercial development or economic development, or what we want the town to be. I mean, people are asking us for something in exchange for meeting an objective, in my opinion, and it's one of these three objectives. And maybe there's, again, it's affordable housing. Maybe that's cut and dry because we have a definition of it. But again, I think we should be pointing back to some of the documents and how are we going to make these decisions? We all agree that the definition under economic development is pretty wide open. The other two are not. So basically this document doesn't do anything except now we have a process to tell you we're going to take every one of these completely based on whatever the board interprets at that time. And, I think we should give some guide rails about, guiding principle or guiding documents a little bit more closely somewhere in this document, because it's entirely too wide open. Maybe that's the definition of what economic development is, because right now I don't see this process making it easier for any anybody because it's really kind of the process now.
How about if we'd add a section to that application, and that's where staff could help them, when they're filling that out, to identify what goals within what planning document does this meet? Because we can't really expect them to know all that, but I think staff could have a pretty good idea. If it's something that's coming out of our Parks and Rec plan or our economic development plan or the comp plan. I mean, that's where I can think of putting it. Or when the staff does their presentation, when this comes to the board, then the staff needs to identify, does this meet goals within any of our planning documents? Suggestion.
I don't know. Maybe I'm off base. Maybe I'm trying to solve the wrong problem. I mean, this
Oh
is
no,
just.
I think it's good. It's just you put the onus, you want it on them, or like, should staff include it in our report when it comes to the board?
No, I think it's a very good point, Kenyon. I recollect an annexation that relied on the comprehensive plan as a justification for success. So I don't think it's an undue burden for anybody who wants to develop to be able to identify in the comp plan that we've been talking about mixed use for 12 years now, and we haven't built one unit yet. So no, I think that is a very, very, very valid point, and I'd like to get it in here somewhere. I don't know where exactly, Counselor. You could probably figure that out, but I think that is a really, really important abiding by where the people of Lyons have said that they would like to go and how they would like to grow, and have it be aligned somewhat with what the developer is proposing.
So what about if we included as part of the minimum documentation a narrative description of how the proposed development supports the Lions comprehensive plan or any other planning document?
I think that's great.
I agree. And I also think that, for developers who are not policy wonks, they might not be nimble enough to be able to do that. So I appreciate Administrator Simonson's offer to work with them, which is, I think, what she was doing. I think that would be important because I think expecting a developer to read and comprehend all of the different development plans and comprehensive plans, that's kind of a burden. And they would probably get a better understanding of it through working with staff.
And again, that comes back to that initial meeting with Administrator Simonson and how she can provide really, really important information to make sure that these projects and developments move as expeditiously as possible. I agree 100%.
The time value of money of one water share, one CBT versus 2 max shares, you can do an awful lot of reading for $55,000.
So I've put my attempt at distilling this into a requirement into this draft. So if anybody has any comments on that, but I think that's probably the best way to do it, is make it part of the original application that you show how it's supported by the comp plan or any other relevant planning document.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That looks good.
Do we have any more feedback on, the kind of the board process and how that's going to be done, whether it should be a public meeting, or, I mean, of course, it'll be a public meeting, but a public hearing? Any feedback on that?
I
I
think
think it's good to have public comment. One of the things we talked about when we first agreed to amend the IGA and take Lake McIntosh shares is not all economic development might be good. There might be some types of proposals that members of the public would say, we really don't want one of those types of businesses in Lyons. And so we ought to give them a chance to say that.
the more open, the better. The more sunshine, the brighter.
All right, so there's no more comment on this section. I guess I'll move on to the next one. Fixing some formatting as we go. So this is just really the process. I think a lot of people are confused, developers, when they come in about what is the process for the actual dedication. And I think it's just making it absolutely clear that nothing is really final until the building permit stage. And so the actual dedication will happen at the time that the building permit is requested. That we're not going to make a final determination of the amounts until a building permit is requested. And then the cost and time of both securing and transferring the shares to the town are solely the responsibility of the developer. So there's that piece, and then if there's no comment on that piece of the policy, the next one's really the part that that I'm always concerned about, which is what happens. What does the actual grant of this permission mean? And I just want to make it absolutely clear that that the board has the opportunity to revoke its decision if things have changed prior to the building permit being pulled. And what we're really worried about here is kind of really vested rights issues, and that we're not creating a new type of vested right by that if we were to give this permission to proceed to Lake McIntosh share dedication, that doesn't mean that your underlying zoning is approved, your underlying building permit is approved. And all it means is that for now, we have given you permission to dedicate Lake McIntosh shares, and that we can revoke that if the project changes in some sort of substantial way. And I just kind of created the process by which the town administrator can alert can schedule a meeting for the board to reconsider essentially whether the proposed change disqualifies the project, and the board conducts another recorded vote. Something that became clear to me as I was writing this is that there may be a situation where people would potentially speculate in Lake McIntosh shares, where they'd go out and try to secure approval to get Lake McIntosh shares for a particular project and then sell it to another party. So I wanted to avoid that by creating that there's no third party approvals. And then finally, as I said earlier, that the granted the Lake McIntosh share dedication permission does not constitute any sort of land use approval or vested right. And so this section is kind of boring, but that's what I was playing with here, is kind of those concepts.
It might be boring, but it's really important. Thank you.
So does the board have any other feedback on this policy or anything else, any changes that would like to be seen or any additions? And this really was meant to be kind of a draft document with ideas we were thinking about. And I think the next steps, as I mentioned earlier, is that we were going to distill this into an application form if the board agreed with the policy is kind of laid out here. And so we would create an application form. There would be a resolution approving this policy. And then as soon as that resolution happened, we begin processing applications for share dedications in this way.
I have a question, if I might. And Attorney Dittman, thank you for this. I think this is terrific. So, and I'm not sure how this theoretically might work, but one issue that I know came up in Boulder quite a lot and still does is the city would give a developer, say, extra height in exchange for a community benefit. The developer would build the development and then would not provide the community benefit, and then there's no recourse. So if we grant Lake McIntosh shares to a developer, they get their building permit, they build it out, but it's not exactly what they described it was going to be. Do we have any recourse? So, just off the top of my head, say a developer says, I'm going to build a mixed use building, and on the bottom floor, there's going to be a great restaurant space. And they build the building, but don't ever wind up providing the restaurant space. And instead it's a real estate office. Is that something that we want to consider?
Well, I think in that particular instance, it'd be kind of hard to dictate the market conditions by which someone would rent a space. But I understand your example may be imperfect, and there could be other examples. Certainly if it's not built in accordance with the building permit, then that would be an issue for the final certificate of occupancy for the tenant, for the developer. So I think that would be one potential recourse in that situation, is that if it's not in accordance with the building permits, that the certificate of occupancy would not be granted. And so that would be the initial kind of reaction I would have to that. I'm just trying to think of another example and what exactly the issue would be, one, and then whether the pulling of the water shares would be the best remedy, or whether it'd be another one. And I think a lot of cases is probably gonna be the certificate of occupancy is going to be probably the best remedy, the one most aligned with the harm, which is you didn't build in accordance with the building permit.
Well, Brandon, plus anything over 2,000 square feet has got to go through the whole development review process and wind up with a development agreement. So you could certainly address that there.
Yeah, you could always sue for you're violating the development plan or development agreement. Excuse me.
And I think that's it. I think it's 2,000 square feet. You got to go through that whole process, and so the town would have multiple chances to put conditions on a development during that process.
Yeah, we always have a contractual right to sue in that situation. So I think, yes, I mean, there are potential remedies. This is one of many stacks in that approval process, if you will, for that project. And the other ones may be better suited to remedy the situation. I guess there is a situation, though, if a project is approved as one of these three categories, and it is that for a number of years, let's say, and then it changes to something else entirely, affordable housing being the one that is probably the most likely, that it starts off as an affordable housing project and becomes, market rent apartments later on. Did it still receive the benefit of the Lake McIntosh share dedications it got when it was an affordable housing project? I don't know how you claw these back necessarily. Once they're dedicated to the town, how do you claw them back? I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. How do you say, oh, not affordable anymore? It's market rate, so yeah, well, CBT shares now.
They're deed restricted. The ones we have now are.
Yeah. I mean, they'll be deed restricted most likely, but how long is that deed restriction?
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that, once again, when you go through the approval process, the development plan agreement for those units, that you're going to require permanent or, practically permanent, affordability as part of that process. So there's not a real risk there, but certainly in other municipalities, there have been instances where, an affordable housing project has become market rate, after 10 years or so. And what would you do with the water shares in that case? But it's just kind of something to think about, I guess. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there's a good way to claw back the shares once they've been dedicated to the town.
I keep thinking back to what Trustee Wass said at the last meeting, and it sort of resonated with me when he was talking about economic development, was that essentially these water shares, they don't cost the town anything. They're just dedication according to the criteria that we set forth. So in that case, it was done under good intention, and we wouldn't pursue a clawback, I guess.
All right. Is there any other feedback for this policy, or, we're gonna have an agenda item on the regular meeting where the board can issue direction, or whether, you like to see this policy promulgated, which means a resolution and then an application form. But if there's any other feedback at this time as to wordsmithing or additional criteria you'd like to see considered, now is kind of the time to raise those issues.
Can we use the term in regard to affordable housing that they remain so in perpetuity, Counselor?
Deed restricted.
Yep.
Well, deed restriction, you need to be careful because deed restriction does not necessarily mean permanent. There is proof of income restriction is one of the requirements. There may be certain grant programs where you can't get permanency, but you can get practically permanency, which may be 99 years or so. So I'd rather kind of leave that to the development plan agreement stage, which is what we've done previously. Where we can kind of consider the specifics of the funding mechanisms and whether or not they would enable a real perpetuity of the income restriction.
Okay.
I have something to say about kind of deed restrictions and the time frame and all that. I feel like even if or maybe the way to go about affordable housing with these bigger developers who want to come in and, make these big developments is that, first of all, I'm trusting that you guys received the affordable housing, Boulder County affordable housing document from Victoria today. I don't know whether you had a chance to look through it or not, but also, if we put something in there, maybe that was like affordable housing for 5 years. It doesn't even have to be that long, just as long as there's affordable housing for a term, because more people that come in and build, if they have affordable housing, this has been something that's been tossed around with the commission that I've been on for quite a while, is how do we get the affordable housing piece done? What's the best way? And I think it would be more amenable to some of these bigger developments to put, X percentage of affordable housing in for X amount of time, which doesn't mean necessarily in perpetuity. It doesn't have to be 99 years, but it could potentially be, 10 years. So then hopefully somebody else comes along during that time and puts in another development and they have, do you see what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think that at least the application materials we're requiring now would allow for that. It's just proof of income restriction. And right now there isn't a time period put on that, or, any sort of, we just want to look at what type of income restriction you're doing. Doesn't dictate about how it's done.
Is that it?
I don't see anybody else requesting to speak on this.
I think you did a great job, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good.
All right, so we'll have a general business item on this, on direction the board wants to give on this. It's not appropriate for a workshop to provide direction. So.
All right. So we'll see each other at 7 o'clock.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
No, it isn't. That weekend weather wasn't very nice, was it? We live in paradise.
I got a tea time at noontime tomorrow.
Oh, boy. Ah,
And then maybe I go skiing on Thursday. And then maybe I go fishing on Friday.
there you go.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, you know what time it is? No. Party time. Get out the news.
Okay. I'll call the Monday, February 1st, 2021 Board of Trustees regular meeting to order. Could we have the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Present?
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Present.
Trustee Lowell,
Present.
Trustee Carapus,
Present.
Trustee Waugh,
Present.
Trustee Rogan,
Present.
and Trustee Miller.
Present.
Please all rise and recite the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
This is the time on our agenda when we take a reflective moment of silence. Keep in mind who we would like to keep in mind at this time. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Would anybody like to amend the agenda at this time? Seeing none, we'll take the call. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Carapus,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
and Trustee Miller.
Yay.
The agenda is approved unanimously. This is an opportunity for the audience to address the Board of Trustees at this time. If you do, please state your name and address for the record. Is there anybody that wishes to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Madam Clerk?
I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised, sir.
We'll move on. Boulder County Sheriff's Report, Sergeant Bill Christ.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I have a short report tonight. first and foremost, everything's going very good in town. Very quiet, which is nice, knock on wood. Just some basic calls for service and whatnot, but everything else is looking good. The Liquor Enforcement Division, quick update on the Lion's Den. The Liquor Enforcement Division and Mr. Yarbrough and his legal counsel looks like have come to a tentative agreement on principle, basically like a plea. So the court trial set for February 3rd and 4th has been continued. It looks like more than likely after they iron out some details, he will agree to a 90-day suspension, which will be retroactive from the date of December 5th, when his liquor license went into the first summary suspension. So basically it will stay in effect through March 5th. A condition of that obviously is going to be that Mr. Yarbrough and the Lion's Den remain in full compliance with any and all future public health order mandates and so forth. So that's not 100% official, but that's the way it's going at this point. I was expected to testify this week, but I was notified last week that they had come to a preliminary agreement, which looks like that's how this will roll out in the future. So that's my update there, and that's all I have for the board tonight.
Does anybody on the board have a question for Sergeant Christ? Please stay safe, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Trustee reports. Trustee Lowell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm working apace on the annual town report. We're in great shape. I mean, I'm expecting 36 inputs. I've got 25 of them with promises for the rest. So, and it's looking really good. The Ecology Board, I didn't attend it because it was on the same night as our Board of Trustees meeting on the 19th. But in reading through their notes, they are going to meet with the PCDC to discuss their viewpoint on the comprehensive plan and some of the things they'd like to see included in it. They also had rather a lengthy discussion on the dead trees in Laverne Johnson Park. Those would be those dead, I believe they're locust trees on the west side of the park at the foot of the cliff. They've been dead since sometime after the flood. And unfortunately, about 2/3 of that is on Boulder County property on the other side of the river. So perhaps Director Cosgrove can give us an update on that at some point. But the Ecology Board is concerned about that, and they discussed it at length. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Got unmuted. Yeah, I have no boards and commissions to report on because Parks Commission is not meeting till next week. But one aspect of trustee reports occasionally is sort of trustee free speech privileges. Our little Hyde Park corner, if you will. I try not to abuse that too often, but I do have something important that I want to report on tonight. This is going to be the CNN headline news version of a 5-page paper I've done after doing some research. I'll make that paper available to each board member, to the staff, and to any citizen or member of the public or press who wants a copy. At our last meeting, the subject was brought up of town affordable housing policy, in particular, a resolution of a prior board that set that policy. So I read the resolution and did some research, and here's my report on that. The 2016 resolution of the Board of Trustees set a goal of 10% for affordable housing in Lyons. It did not set a requirement, either townwide or for any project. That goal was 10%. It wasn't 12%. The resolution specifically references market rate single family home construction as something that might generate affordable housing requirements, not mixed use development. And finally, this was not a requirement for any individual project of any size, but rather a town-wide goal. Since there is a 10% goal set under a resolution, I think it's fair to ask, how are we doing? So I did some research on that. At build out, which we're very close to, there will be approximately 1,000 residential units in the town of Lyons. That's based on our number of electric accounts. When Summit's housing is completed, we will have 72 permanently affordable residential housing units, consisting of Summit, Walt Self Center, Bloomfield Place, Mountain Gate, and Habitat. 72 out of 1,000 is 7.2%. If you count the 8 accessory dwelling units that the town has subsidized and strongly encouraged since the flood to replace lost low-cost housing, that brings us to 80 affordable housing units, 8.8%. There's another property in town that is de facto affordable housing that the town to some degree permits to continue. It's the chicken coops property. We could get into a long discussion about whether that qualifies or doesn't qualify, but de facto it is low cost housing, very similar to some of the housing that was lost in the flood. It includes 8 mobile homes, for example. There are 14 units there. Should you count that property, we're up to 94 units total, 9.4%. I think that's pretty good. I think the Lyons has done a darn good job on its affordable housing. Longmont, by contrast, right now is a little bit over 6%. I talked to their affordable housing director. They've got more units in the pipeline, so their percentage is going to go up. But right now, we're at least equal to or ahead of them. My opinion is that we still need more affordable housing, but I think it's fair to talk about what we can do to make that happen. The number one biggest problem to more affordable housing in Lyons is there is no place to build it. We have at most 9, count them, 9 residential lots left in town. That limitation is why a 10% goal that we can get close to if we're good makes a lot more sense for Lyons than the county-wide goal of 12%. Of those 9 residential lots, every single one of them, the current owners have the legal right to do market rate expensive housing on. There are actually active plans in the works for 7 of those 9. The town of Lyons cannot retroactively go in and impose a percentage affordable housing contract on those properties that have already gotten all approvals for market rate housing. Unlike Longmont and Boulder and some other places in Boulder County, Lyons does not have any space for new developments that inclusionary housing requirements can be put on. Except for those 9 lots, we have no place left to build. There are other things that differentiate Lyons' affordable housing approach from larger cities or even smaller cities like Lafayette or Louisville. One is the size of developments. There simply aren't any 80-unit apartment complexes or big new subdivisions in Lyons that we can apply a percentage housing requirement to. And we're not going to get any because, again, there's no place to build them. A key part of affordable housing, inclusionary housing policies elsewhere is the cash in lieu program. There are a lot of developers, especially in smaller projects in Boulder and Longmont, that do not build any affordable housing at all in their particular projects. Rather, they pay cash in lieu of building that housing into an affordable housing fund that those cities administer to underwrite and subsidize larger affordable housing projects that are pure affordable housing. Thirdly, those cities both have administrative staffs, housing authorities of their own. We have none in Lyons and no staff to administer the very difficult aspects of affordable housing, where you have to not only document and substantiate upfront eligibility, but do an annual eligibility review. And finally, there's the issue of the size of affordable housing projects themselves. An affordable housing expert who came into one of our seminars here in Lyons post-flood said that given the system of tax credits and grants that subsidize most modern affordable housing in Colorado, her opinion was that a minimum of 30 units is probably as small a project as you can possibly do. Boulder and Longmont's projects in the works average 50 to 60 units. You don't see 1 or 2 unit affordable housing unit, 1 or 2 affordable housing units in a 3 to 4 unit mixed use project. The economics of affordable housing just don't work for those. Instead, you see small mixed-use developers pay cash in lieu into a housing fund. To try to coerce small developers into doing affordable housing and small mixed-use projects downtown will have a predictable result. You won't get much, if any, affordable housing, maybe 1 or 2 additional units if you're in total, if you're lucky, and you'll go a long way to killing off mixed-use development downtown. If real estate offices and empty spaces are what is an acceptable status quo for downtown Lyons, then proceeding the way we've been doing, or trying to engraft affordable housing components into downtown projects, is the way to go. But if we really want mixed use development in Lyons, which our comp plan and downtown improvement plan say we do, we should not try to dictate affordable housing where it makes no economic sense. Instead, we should spend our time and effort focusing on the one possible area where it might have a chance to actually make an appreciable difference, and that's the Eastern Corridor. That's a complex subject. It's not going to be easy to do affordable housing there. I'll be glad to discuss that subject with anyone who wants to discuss it with me, or maybe that would make a good future board workshop. For now, we need to understand, and the public needs to understand, that the economics of affordable housing won't support it applicable to every new potential development in Lyons. We should not try to force it in places it won't work. However well-intentioned that may be, the number of units we would get from that will not appreciably advance our affordable housing goal, and it will dramatically hurt our chances of development in downtown Lyons. That's my report.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Rogan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. So I'll start with Dr.Cog. I attended the Dr.Cog meeting last week to talk about Lyons' position on the 100%, either the 90-10 or the 100% federal grant money for our projects. No decision has been finalized yet at Dr.Cog. That's upcoming. I am going to be attending the Boulder County Council of Cities meeting on Wednesday. So that's great. Coming up this Friday is the Historic Preservation Committee and PCDC joint meeting at 3 o'clock to discuss the historic preservation ordinance that we've been working on. I imagine that anybody's welcome to attend that. And also the packet is up if you want to take a look at the draft that we're talking about. I missed the EVC meeting. Kim helpfully provided some notes. They talked about the Boulder County Economic Development Grants, the possibility for having Amazon lockers in town, which I personally would be super excited about. And doing an inventory of existing business spaces and kind of what they're used for, the ones that are filled and the ones that are not filled. And I'm sure Kim would, if she's on, be willing to fill in any blanks there. So the Board Staff Relations Committee met to discuss kind of how we want to move forward. And those discussions are ongoing. I got voluntold by Trustee Lowell that I was going to be the chair of that committee. So I'm the chair of that committee. And then finally, I've been having discussions with the library and I see Kara's on in kind of an unofficial manner, but as a trustee about doing a One Book, One Lyons event. And I hope to have a more fulsome update of that soon, but a book has been selected. It's called The White Privilege Pop Quiz, and the author is willing to facilitate discussions. So look for that coming up soon, and that's it.
Thank you. And good luck at the Consortium of Cities meeting on Wednesday. Thank you. Trustee Wah.
Hello, I'm going to, I wasn't at the last PCDC meeting, and there is a presentation later about what happened at that meeting. So I'm just going to let that go as my report. And that's all I have.
Okay, Trustee Miller.
I don't really have much either. There is the deadline for the Hearts of Lions tomorrow. Let me see what the Hearts of Lions. Oh wait, upcoming Hearts of Lions call to artist deadline is February 22nd. So we're trying to get at least 10 people to, submit their art, but so far we've only got one. So hopefully we can get more interest going in that. And that's about it. I haven't attended any meetings since the last meeting, so.
Thank you. Trustee Caravas.
Good evening, everybody. It's Valentine's month, so don't forget your favorite Valentine, whether human or animal. If you have a dog at my house, he gets treats and he's extremely spoiled, so don't forget your animals. Not much to report. I missed the last UEB meeting. We have a UEB meeting this Wednesday, the 3rd. We'll be at 4:30 as it always is, so please join if you have time. Thank you.
And I don't have anything to report in regard to committee meetings. Attended an online meeting with Congressman Neguse today, and they're moving forward on the new benefit package. And hopefully he was much more optimistic than in the last administration. I attended a banner raising at the church for Martin Luther King Day. I forgot to mention at the last meeting. And I got to quote one of the great reverend's sayings of that we should be judged by our character instead of the color of our skin. And I agree. Madam Clerk, could you please read item 1 under boards and commissions?
Yes, item 1 is the Planning, Community and Development Commission comp plan and funding strategy.
Staff?
Hi, everybody. This is Yanni Jones. I'm a historic preservationist and planner for the town of Lyons. I'll be doing the staff report on this item. Just a really quick update from PCDC about their strategy for their comp plan. Essentially, at their last meeting, they decided that they went really back and forth. They weighed a lot of different options and they put some really serious consideration into this decision, but they'd like to reapply for the DOLA EIAF grant, the Energy and Mineral Impact Assistance Fund grant, for the Tier 1 spring cycle for the full amount. And they decided to do that because they thought it would be most respectful and responsible toward our taxpayers and for our town budget. So that was sort of the impetus for that decision. So because of that, staff renegotiated with Darcy White from Clarion, the consultant chosen for that process. And she essentially set up a new scope, which separates out phases 1 through 3 of the project for $80,000, the amount budgeted for 2021. And that would include a complete staff draft. So the first full draft of the comp plan. So in the worst case scenario, we will be left with a full draft that staff would then be able to shepherd through the last phase of the project in the worst case scenario. So that is their plan moving forward. PCDC just would like some feedback from you on if you approve of that plan or if you have any other thoughts. Thank you.
Are there any thoughts or questions or direction for Yanni by the board? Mayor Pro Tem.
I have high confidence in the PCDC's ability to chart the best course for that. The PCDC includes 2 members that have experience on this board and other members that have been there quite a long time. And if their judgment is that's the best way to proceed, then I accept their judgment.
Any further comments? Yanni, didn't I read that we also had the option of delaying completion and budgeting for the money if we don't receive it next year?
I'm sorry, can you restate that question?
Did I read that we also could budget the remaining $36,000 to complete the comp plan next year out of the town budget?
Right, in the event that we do not receive the grant, when the award letters go out in May, the PCDC will pursue other options for obtaining that last $36,000. So they will look for other funding sources, but they may come back to request from the Board of Trustees that additional $36,000
Okay,
in the event that the grant is not awarded.
okay. Thank you. I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem in regard to the PCDC having the capability to know the best direction that they would like to take. But worst case scenario to me would be that we would have to allocate $36,000 next year to complete the comp plan, and we certainly would at that point, is my feeling. Any other comments or questions for Yanni? Thank you. Mayoral appointments. Oh, this is always the joy of the position, because I continue to be astounded at the talent that resides in our town. And I always look on the applications and I can't believe some of the things that I read. But we have very talented people that are going to be appointed tonight. Mike Jackson to the Utilities and Engineering Board. Our wonderful librarian, Kara Bauman, to the Sustainable Futures Commission. And David Hamrick to the Citizens Budget Advisory Board. Staff reports of flood recovery update.
Evening, everybody. Not sure why my camera's not working. It was working earlier today. There's a few items I just wanted to mention that were not in my report. Just wanted to give you guys an update and let you know that we're still working on the one temporary easement agreement. We have acquired a condemnation attorney, and we did have a meeting today and talked about next steps and what we need to do. So that may be our next steps. We're still in the process of making one final offer. Also wanted to let everybody, make everybody aware that we will be bringing in the girders on February 15th and the 16th, and that will be from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So they will be working at night, bringing the girders in and installing them. We will have communications going out to as door knockers to homeowners. We will be doing several e-blasts. We do have a website where you can find information about project updates. And I will be contacting some of the residents directly about this work, and they will have lights on and they won't be doing overnight work. And then finally, just a quick update, the state DHSM Department of Homeland Security had given the town $9.5 million of advanced funds to help us cash flow flood recovery. And we did have a meeting with them last week, and they are wanting us to come up with a plan to start paying that back. So staff will be meeting this week, and we will be coming up with a plan to work with the state to start getting this paid back. And it's all dependent on when they also finalize all of our reimbursements, all of our closeout, and we can acquire all of our match. And so they're aware of that. So we'll come up with a plan for that. The Pet Bridge, we have a kickoff meeting for design on Wednesday. So we're getting that going. And we'll start design of another storm water project in the Bone Park area within the next month. So still a lot going on. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Tracy? Do you think that we're in good shape in regard to reimbursements and that we're not going to be faced with any large sums that we won't have, that we'll have to take out of the general fund?
That's what we're going to take a really close look at. There will be some expenses that will not be reimbursable, and we are tracking that, and it's a working document at this time. But the state did say if we have a shortfall of funding that we need to work with them on finding other funding for that. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, but we have started tracking a lot of that. But the reimbursement, on the FEMA side, the state said their reimbursement of what's eligible for reimbursement has been less than 1%. So it's been very good. And on the CDBG side, it's been very good too. So I don't anticipate that it's going to be a large number, but it could be a decent number that's, that the town will have to, it will be a lot for the town, and we'll have to figure out how to cover that. And we already have a lot of ideas, and we'll be working on that.
Good, thank you. Keep us updated please keep us updated on that.
Yes.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Tracy? Trustee Miller.
I just have a question about like the bridge timeline and if that's on point. Are they where they're projected to be at this point in the construction?
Yes, currently we're on schedule. The project completion date is June 30th, and we are on schedule. However, I'm not sure with this temporary construction easement. That's something I see possibly being an issue, but we're trying to work as quickly as we can to get this issue resolved so that it doesn't delay the project. But you never know what other delays you might run into, but right now we are on schedule.
Further questions? Thank you, Tracy. Administrator's report.
Good evening, everyone. I submitted my report and I have a couple updates on COVID since this went out on Thursday afternoon. On Friday, the governor did host a press conference, and he is looking at a couple of options on the dial. If you recall, that's the red, orange, yellow situation. They are taking input, individual and group input on the potential of lowering the length of time required on a dial color before you can reduce to the next color. So they are taking input on that. If any of you have an interest, I can send you the link on that. He also announced we found out that Boulder County is going to be eligible for 5-star certification in the coming days. What that means is it allows, like if we're currently in the orange dial, that businesses that take extra precautions and following the public health orders are able to operate one color lower than what we are. So example, a restaurant would be able, if they applied to be in the 5-star certification, would be able to have 50% occupancy right now instead of only 25. So it's a couple programs that the state is looking at. The other big news at the state level at the state level is starting February 8th, vaccinations will be given to persons 65 and older instead of 70. So Mark put his, so we are making some progress there. Just so you know, in Boulder County, we have about 22,000 residents in Boulder County that have had at least one dose, and about 4,000 that have had both of their doses to date. Numbers are continuing to decline, and trying hard to figure out how to move teachers up that vaccination schedule so that schools can potentially get back together. That's the COVID update other than my report. We are working closely with Colorado Tourism Office on a winter promotion strategy toolkit for trying to come up with off-season activities for our area, as well as doing what we did last year. The Colorado National Park Planner will be part of that magazine again, which does highlight lines quite effectively for the national park goers. Our staff have been busy, as you guys have heard, applying for several different grants right now, all of which I hope to hear from in February. So we're looking at the US 36 Broadway Avenue Improvement Project. We're looking at the St. Vrain Corridor Trail Project. We have submitted a small Boulder County Economic Development grant that is again to help businesses with outdoor venues. We are also have been in discussions with Go Colorado, Great Outdoors Colorado, and submitting a grant that would make improvements to the Black Bear Hole, the 2nd Avenue parking area, and those improvements to Laverne Johnson Park we talked about earlier about converting parking spaces to camp spaces. So all of those are in motion as we speak, and should be hearing back on those and the DOLA grant for Longs Peak to do some matching funds to our Long Peak water sewer project. So I really am hopeful that by our next meeting, we'll have some answers on those. This weekend, the town is hosting Old Man Winter, so that schedule is in your packet if you are wanting to participate or if you're wanting to observe that. And then the other big news that we heard on, I guess it was Thursday, is the Lions Fire Protection District has announced the selection of a new chief, Kevin Nunn, and they have already reached out to us to start working on partnering, meeting him and partnering with him and helping him get oriented to our community. So beyond that, staff has really spent the last couple of weeks working, meeting with some of our potential development developers, specifically the A Lodge is taking steps to move forward with their outdoor beer garden concept. Main Stage Brewing, which will be at 446 and 450 Main Street, what used to be the Fork. They have closed on that business and we're working with them on their remodel or reconfiguration of that business. 349 Main, which is currently the Festivari Inn. We've held a meeting with the owner and developer of that property, as well as Paul Tamburello with updates to his concept for the Eastern Corridor. So of that long list of potential projects I told you about in January, 4 of them are very active at the moment. So our new planning staff, Yanni and Philip, are staying very busy already. Questions from my report?
Any questions for Administrator Simonson? Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Administrator Simonson, there was one item in the report that references an RFP for downtown and US 36 corridor will be issued the week of February 1st, but it didn't say for what. Is that the highway watering beautification stuff, or is it something else?
Yes, that, if it's the RFP, it is for the professional services agreement for the flowers and
That's
the
flower
landscaping.
watering. Okay. And we'll get a report on that as to what the potential cost might be before contract is signed, because the cost of that's gone up considerably in recent years, and it's something I think we ought to look at.
Yeah, staff, it was in your budget for 2021, but you
Yep.
will certainly see what comes back as, bids and what staff is recommending. And of course, you guys can make adjustments to that if you see fit.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have two questions, Administrator Simonson.
Yes.
One of them has to do with the summit applications that we were told we could, for all intents and purposes, get a head start on.
Mm-hmm.
Have we given any thought to how we're going to let the public know about that? And have we assigned any staff to help out with those applications in thought?
We have our summit update meeting tomorrow afternoon. So they are going to give us an update on how the process is finalizing with the state. So we had not started that. I've been thinking about what I'm going to recommend, but we haven't started having those formal discussions yet until they get that property, fully in place and starting to get those public improvements approved. But yes, we have some ideas, and I've also reached out to some others in the county who have said they are able to provide some assistance with helping people fill out applications as well.
Good, that's great. And the other question is, in regard to the trail, have there been any further talks or negotiations with any of the people that we need to speak with to be able to alleviate any concerns in regard to moving forward with that if we receive the grant?
We actually, Philip is on the phone. We're starting with an email to them to notify them, and then individual appointments, and none of those individual appointments have happened yet.
Okay, all right. Any further questions for Administrator Simonson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to legal updates, Counselor.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. I just want to give a quick follow-up on some of the things that Tracy was talking about with meeting with the condemnation attorney today. We will need to submit a resolution approving the condemnation prior to the letter of intent the final offer going out. And so I will be speaking with the town clerk and the town administrator about potentially having a special meeting to authorize that. As Tracy indicated, we want to get this process moving as quickly as possible. And that can't begin until, one, the board approves this resolution, and then two, we submit our final offer. So expect to hear more on that.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please read number 1 under public hearings and ordinances into the record?
Yes, this is the second reading of public hearing of ordinance 1095, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending section 13-1-20 of the Lyons Municipal Code for the purposes of granting the town administrator the ability to promulgate administrative regulations.
Staff background.
So I can give that one. I know last time Attorney Dittman gave that, but I didn't unmute myself quick enough. So this was an ordinance that, sorry, let me switch over. That was brought up and recommended because certain administrative decisions with regard to the utilities could be made by town staff, but currently only the Board of Trustees is authorized to develop and administer these regulations. So typically municipalities do authorize the municipal utilities director or the municipal manager to promulgate regulations that are necessary to manage the utilities. And so this ordinance proposes to grant the power to the town attorney, to the town administrator or their designee.
Any questions for staff by the board?
And just one other update, if I may.
Go ahead, sir.
I have updated the pronouns in the document, as you'll see, from his and hers to their. And so that we did take that back and fix that.
And I did have one recommendation. I didn't see the stormwater utility listed in there. I didn't know if that was left out, or I just happened to notice that the stormwater utility was not in there. So unless it was purposely left out, we might want to amend that to include the stormwater utility.
Would a board member wish to amend the ordinance?
I think once we have a public hearing and a motion and
Yeah.
second, work on
Okay.
that. But I would also support that from my perspective. I think the issue is that the code section that we were amending predated the stormwater utility significantly, so it just wasn't included in the original, and therefore did not make it into this amended version.
So are you saying that we amend the ordinance after the public hearing, Counselor?
Correct. Yeah, we will need a motion and a second, and then we
Okay.
can entertain amendments at that time.
Okay, any further questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing. Since it's the second reading, would anybody in the public wish to address the Board of Trustees on ordinance 1095? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion as previously stated by Aaron to amend.
I think we need a motion first, correct, Brandon? Motion to approve and then we would amend?
I would prefer to do it that way. A motion, a second, and then
Okay,
amendment.
all right. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve ordinance 1095 relating to amending section 13120 of the Lyons Municipal Code.
Okay, and we have a
I'll
second.
second.
Okay, good. Further discussion? Now I'll call for the vote.
But Mayor, I have one amendment to
Okay,
offer,
thank
as
you.
we just talked about.
Okay,
Give me just a second. In section 2 of the proposed ordinance, I propose to amend the first sentence of that section to add a reference to the stormwater utility immediately after the words electric department, water department, and sewer department. We would say electric department, water department, comma, sewer department, and stormwater utility.
do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, as stated by Mayor Pro Tem Browning. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment.
Mayor
Madam
Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Carabas,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
and Trustee Miller.
Yay.
The amendment passes unanimously. Now, are there any further amendments? Seeing none, we'll vote on ordinance 1095 as amended. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Carabas.
Aye.
Ordinance 1095 as amended passes unanimously. On to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I think does the clerk need to read it into the record first?
Oh, I always do that. Thank you, Trustee Rogan. Madam Clerk, could you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes. Item 1 is Resolution 2021-14, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving the Second Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with JUB Engineers Incorporated for construction management services for stormwater improvements and Lyons roadway repairs projects. Item 2 is Resolution 2021-15, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the Ninth Amendment to the Disaster Recovery Services Agreement with OTAP Incorporated for capital improvement in drainage design services, Second Avenue and Bridge Project. Item 3 is Resolution 2021-16, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 13th Amendment to the construction agreement with Walsh Construction Incorporated for Bone Park Phase 2. Item 4 is Resolution 2021-17, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a policy for virtual meeting rules of decorum and etiquette. Item 5 is Resolution 2021-18, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending the Town of Lyons fee schedule. And item 6 is the February accounts payable.
Thank you. And thank you again, Trustee Rogan. I always forget to do that. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I wish to pull an item, please.
Go ahead. You may.
Pull item 4, please.
Item 4, okay. Any other items that anybody would wish to remove from the consent agenda? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 4?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Could we please have the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
Consent agenda, as stated, is approved. Trustee Caravas.
I just wanted to possibly add, if the board approves on .4, each person shall register to speak at the meeting using the person's real name. I'd like to make sure we strengthen that just a tad bit to their real name or their full name and full street address, no PO boxes. I believe that's been, since I've been on the board, that's been a standard. And as we as a board, when we used to meet in person, if someone didn't get that, we would ask them, a mayor or a mayor pro tem in the past would ask them at the dais to do so. Because most people would recognize them anyway if someone's given them a bad address.
Counselor,
Yes.
you had mentioned something about that at the last meeting. Can we require somebody to actually state their physical address?
We can, I'd say yes. I mean, it gets tricky about how much enforceability all these have. I mean, I think this is primarily, this is what we expect to be the rules. How far we'd want to take them, whether we want to mute someone or ban someone is a separate matter, but I think we could put it in this policy as very least be recommended. But there's a certain question about how much enforceable, especially the PO box one, I think.
So how would you proceed in regard to Trustee Caravas' suggestion?
I'd be okay with this suggestion because, as I said, I think most of these, this is the expectations we have, but there's a separate question about how far we want to take them on enforceability.
Okay. And where would that be placed?
So I think one of them would be in the bullet point concerning names. And so I would just add full in addition to real names in bullet point 4. And then I'm trying to find where the address is. Or you just want an address added to that.
Okay.
So we just added a new bullet point saying that each person shall state their address upon being recognized by the chair.
Is that acceptable, Trustee Jarvis?
Yep, yes, it is.
Okay, do we need to amend this like we do an ordinance, Council?
I think we need a first, a second, and then an amendment.
Okay. Oh,
I make that amendment as stated by Counselor.
Can we move to approve this first and get a second, then amendment? Sorry for the process.
that's all right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of resolution 2021-17. I'll call for the vote. Or do we make the change now, Councilor?
So at this point, we would have the amendment.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay,
I'll move to amend this resolution to, as stated by Council, .4, to add full between the real and the name for sentence, and then add I believe you said, Counselor, an additional dot.
Yep. So what I'm drafting for that portion is that each person who's recognized by the chair shall give their full name and address for the record.
Okay.
And that'd be a new bullet point in addition to the changes we mentioned in the previous bullet point where each person needs to register using their full real name.
Okay. That will be my amendment.
Clarification, would that be street address or just address?
What makes sense in Lyons?
Well, because I think Trustee Caravas's point is somebody gives a PO box may or may not actually live in Lyons. And I think that's his point, is to give a street address.
Street
We would
address,
like to,
yeah.
I think it's important to know whether somebody's actually a voting citizen or they live
Okay.
outside town limits.
Yeah, so we'll get full name and street address.
Okay.
okay, so do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend resolution 2021-17 as stated by Trustee Jarvis. Further comments? I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
and Trustee Miller.
Yay.
Resolution 2021-17 is amended unanimously. Now we'll entertain a motion to approve resolution. Oh no, the motion's on the table, is it not, Counselor?
Didn't
We'll vote to
approve as amended.
yeah, we'll vote on 2021-17 as amended. Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller.
Yay.
Resolution 2021-17 passes unanimously. General business agenda request, 622 Overlook Drive sewer connection. Staff?
Oh, yes, that will be me again. And this is a request by an applicant who has been authorized or given the permission to build a garage or to complete the building of the garage. The foundation was there. This has been in the works for a while. It started before, I was actually on as the full-time director of utilities. But at some point there was the discussion, or it was looked at, and maybe we didn't have the utilities director at the time. And so the utilities were not reviewed. And after looking that over, some of the information that was in the drawings didn't fit exactly what I would have thought it should for connecting to the sewer system. And so upon further review, it was looked at that some of the sewer system wasn't accurately depicted in the initial engineering drawings. And the applicant can probably go through some of that in a little more detail. And so afterwards, once they started to look at actually making the changes to where they would need to connect to their sewer system lateral, again, I guess I would point out and emphasize that they were already given the building permit and said that they could connect, they could develop this garage and connect a water connection and a sewer connection to their lateral, which means they would be connecting to their portion, their line on the system, not the mains of the sewer or the water. And upon, again, further inspection, it turns out that there are a lot of complications to try to connect to their sewer lateral because of where this is located. So they are relatively close to the sewer main and could connect directly to the main. But connecting to the sewer main, in the code, it does require that a new tap is paid, new tap fee or a connection fee is paid to connect to the sewer system, to make sure that we're always trying to keep improvements going as more locations connect to that sewer system. The water connection is not in question, and they are able to connect to their own lateral on that. So really the question has come up, do they need to pay for this connection fee? And in the code, there is a section that allows for someone to come to the board to petition or to make their case known to see if they could waive or reduce the connection fee. So that's what the applicant was here to do tonight.
This is interesting to me. Let me just ask you just straight out, Aaron, what is your recommendation?
So I didn't see anything in the code that led to, a specific reason to allow this to be done. I do have some concerns on the precedence of how we are going to allow one location to connect to the sewer system and not have to pay that fee when when somebody else could come forward, multiple locations could come forward. So there is some concern about precedence unless the applicant had sufficient reasons or items that they could show that would really show that this wasn't going to set a precedent and had the valid reasons for why they could do that.
I'll leave it to the board if they have any. Does the board have any other questions of Aaron right now?
Aaron, is the proposal for the garage is going to be built, does it still include the sprinkler system that was going to be required at one point?
Yes.
Okay. I'll speak to that in a minute, but I wanted to make sure that was correct before we got to board discussion.
And we might, I haven't seen any changes. Again, I don't look over the building aspect per se, but I have not heard of that change. So I would assume, yes, the applicant may be able to advise on that. They are.
Yeah, that is correct. So I want to make one minor correction.
You need to be recognized, John.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Let me ask the board first, and then we'll come to you. Does the board have any other further questions for Aaron? Trustee Caravas.
This First Avenue development, has been researched recently, and I've looked at it. I know others have looked at it, and it wasn't built according to specs, or excuse me, specifications that the town dictated when the developer built this. So that farther south end of First Avenue doesn't have a manhole cover for several existing homes up there, which makes it a problem for you as the director to take care of some of our lines. So my question is, where the recommendation is to tap into the line that wasn't even designed in the original First Avenue, my understanding is, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, going from First Avenue, going west down the hill into Second Avenue, is that where that line deviates going down to the west? Is that above or below the no manhole cover area on First Avenue?
So I was up there just the other day. I don't remember seeing there's a manhole that doesn't have a cover. I would think that would.
No, the manhole doesn't exist for clean out.
Oh.
On the town, because the town has a report, and I've got it over my stack of stuff that I think there's a list of 15 deficiencies of that whole First Avenue infrastructure development, and that's one of them. And I haven't found anything as I've tried to look where any of those remedies have been put into place. I mean, I may be wrong. Maybe you can correct me.
And right, I've only seen the few that were in one email. I hadn't seen that specific one. There is, I don't know if it was originally part of the design. There is a line that runs parallel to First, just to the west of First, which is down the hill, which runs more north-south, and also connects to the line that is running down the side of the hill there to the west. So I could bring up a map if it helped. So I just that's where he would be connecting into. And so it wouldn't be on First, it would be below First Avenue.
I understand that. Where I'm getting at is there's a few homes on that south side of First Avenue that aren't fed by a manhole. But for some reason, if this doesn't go through and the applicant has to go underneath his driveway, if we could help out and add at least one manhole there, that would allow possibly some clean out going uphill, of course, which you don't necessarily want to have to do, but it could be done. That's what I'm getting at. And then I have a second question, which was, what is that size of pipe that we're looking at, that the applicant's looking to tap into at this point? Do we know the size of that, the diameter of that? It is 8 inch. Okay, thank you.
At least that's what I have on the drawings.
Do we have any way to verify that with no manholes up there?
Actually, I had been there and looked at it. I believe it is 8 inch.
Okay, good. Okay.
Any further questions? Let's see. Let's have the applicant address the Board of Trustees at this time. John, you're recognized. Your name and address for the record?
Yeah, John Shimmick on 622 Overlook in Lyons, the property in question. So I have one quick comment to make on a description of the permit. There was, when we bought the house, a foundation built for a garage on the lower level. And unfortunately, the driveway on our house is very steep. So we had abandoned that permitted structure. And the structure in question now was completely re-permitted from scratch. It's got a different footprint than the foundation that sits there. So the tap into the main line was made this year. It was not grandfathered in per se from the other structure. The other structure didn't have plans to have any sort of sewer or water. The next thing I want to mention is that indeed we are being forced to install a large sprinkler system into this garage that isn't a living space in any way. It's I believe a 10 sprinkler head system, a 300-gallon cistern, and a high current pump because there isn't enough pressure on the hydrants up top. So that's one of the reasons why I'm asking the town to waive this, is because it's a pretty large expense to tap into the sewer fee. It was something that we believed had been permitted and approved successfully. We couldn't online find any discrepancy that showed us that our house tap line wasn't, the same main we're trying to go into. And to get access to this existing house line requires that we go under a fairly new driveway above a drain, a stormwater drain, which is below our driveway. And it requires a lot of sensitivity and digging up of old driveway. So while I understand that, it sets a weird precedence, I think the fact that, we're paying for a sprinkler system that I don't personally think is something I should necessarily be required to do for garage and studio. I guess that's the foundation at which I'm requesting that the town consider my plea.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Further questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
I didn't have any questions, but I did have some comments. If somebody else has questions, I'll defer to them.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I'm somewhat familiar with this property. It's not too far down the street from us. Overlook Drive branches off of First Avenue. As the applicant has stated, there have already been some very significant costs imposed on the property owner by the town due to low water pressure on First Avenue. It's not on just this part of First Avenue, it's the whole length of the street. I think there's 17 houses on First Avenue, another one down at the end of Overlook Drive. Not a single one of those has sprinklers in the houses or the garage. But just because the water pressure didn't pass muster when this garage needed to be added as an add-on to the house, all of a sudden this house has to put a sprinkler, this garage has to put an expensive sprinkler system in just because they got caught at the end of the development process and nobody else had to do that. My view of it is that it's really the town's responsibility once it accepts ownership and maintenance responsibility of the water and sewer lines to address things like water pressure issues. And it's really the town's failure to provide adequate water pressure in these lines that has created significant additional expense for this homeowner. Additionally, as Trustee Karavas said, there's a extensive review done in 2009 of the infrastructure along First Avenue and Overlook Drive, where multiple aspects of the stormwater drainage system were not built according to design. There are drainage basins that are too small, that aren't put low enough. The whole sewer line system was supposed to flow one way toward the north. It's split into two lines, flowing different ways. There's, like you said, a whole list of things that didn't get done. That infrastructure was built, as best I can tell, in years roughly 2000, 2001. The people who were involved for the town back then, the town engineer at the time, the town administrator at the time, are long since gone. So the question that a lot of our residents on First Avenue and the Overlook residents have is, how in the world did the town ever sign off on the infrastructure as built? Because it didn't conform to the design at all. And nobody can answer that question because the people that would know aren't here anymore. So my point is kind of that there have been a lot of hardships put on this property in particular, but also the First Avenue property owner in general, that really are not the individual homeowner's fault. And the catch that this homeowner got caught in to have to put in an expensive sprinkler system when nobody else had to is, to some extent kind of the town's responsibility, but he's agreed to do that at considerable expense. So I think this concession, which as far as I can tell, would not have a major effect on the town's, or any kind of effect really on the town sewer system, is something that's that the board should consider because of the unique circumstance of this property. And I notice in the memo that there's a reference to the code about to approve this, the board has to find a significant public benefit. Well, as the property owner said, the original garage that was designed behind this house never got built and really can't be built. And so the result is there's no place for the homeowners and their guests to park their cars off of Overlook Drive as you would normally have. So they end up parking at the end of the street or up on a cul-de-sac. And Overlook Drive is a very narrow, steep street if you've ever seen it. It's barely wide enough for a fire truck to get by, and having extra cars parked on the narrow street or up on the cul-de-sac is not a good idea. So I think that there is a significant public benefit by allowing the garage to be completed. And I think I'm not that worried about precedent, because I think this is literally a one-of-a-kind property and a one-of-a-kind situation with respect to the infrastructure that's, I hope, not going to be repeated anywhere else in town. So for all of those reasons, I'm in favor of granting this request. I think it's the right and fair thing to do.
Did have one other item I didn't mention.
You hang on a second, Aaron. I need to let Mark know. Mark, you could run the meeting. The mayor is just perfectly fine, just his computer is not fine. So we're working on that. So go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, Aaron, you asked for. Okay.
And just to state that because it may have some bearing, that the applicant, when he originally submitted, it had been submitted as though he was connecting to his lateral. And I think this is in favor of the applicant, and it had been okayed, and it wasn't until later on that it was found out that it was not his lateral. So that's part of why he's stuck in this situation, is then it was determined that this was the main. So he had been approved to move forward.
Okay. Are there other trustee comments? Trustee Waugh?
I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Browning. I think this is a unique situation. I think that begs the question that almost every property in Lyons, because of that's been either underdevelopment or been an ongoing development of any kind with the town for more than one administration, often comes into these issues. So, I'm in favor of it, and I think that we should be thinking of each property and each situation as its own, and not be as worried about creating precedents, because we're not a cookie cutter town. So, I'm all for
it. Trustee Lowell?
Yeah, I'm in favor of waiving the sewer tap too. It doesn't appear to me in reading through the documentation that we're not talking about another residence. I don't think we're going to be increasing the effluent load at the sewer. I think the applicant has stated quite clearly what the issue is with the logistics of trying to put in a new tap. So I'm in favor of waiving the fee and allowing him to tap.
Any further comments? Trustee Rogan?
Yep, I concur with all y'all. I'm in favor of waiving.
Okay. Trustee Caravas?
I too concur with everyone else with this, for this particular issue, for the particular reason stated by Mayor Pro Tem. I also took the opportunity to have for the board, any of those in the public, look at the packet of the hydrants and the pressure and the size of lines. And the reason I did that, Aaron, was right down below it, that map indicates a high pressure hydrant and doesn't show any lines going in or out of it. This is more of a reference point for the board, that this is why, when it comes to our budgeting and the capital improvement projects, these hydrants, if you look at that, all the dead ends, and now some of this may have been fixed. This map is kind of old. And I would like to see the UAB get direction from this board to really look at this hydrant issue. I think he's already working on it, and I know that from being on the UAB. But this is a serious issue. There is no reason for a garage to have sprinkler system in it that way, unless the property owner wants it to be forced to, as the Mayor Pro Tem said, with an entire street with that low of pressure on those hydrants. I think you all just study that map pretty good and look at it closely, because it is our responsibility to fix that. And I prefer us, as most of you already heard during our budget session, I prefer doing that than some of the short-term, people have their personal causes they want to take care of for what's going on in the country at this time or that time. But really isn't going to matter if we don't have hydrant pressures and the fire department decides to say, you know what, we can't help you because there's nothing to do. We start losing homes. It's a big concern. So I see this as a not setting a precedent for mainly this reason, that we just need to get this taken care of. Thank you. And I think the mayor might have something to say, so I'm gonna take my computer over to him.
Okay.
I have a comment too.
The Town Administrator Simonson.
I just want to make sure that Mr. Schimick realizes that if he installs a sewer and water into the garage, that it is not approved to be used as an ADU without getting an application for that. That just happens around town frequently.
Could I ask the applicant to confirm his understanding of that?
Yeah, that's correct. I also talked to someone in the town wanting me to sign an affidavit. Yeah, our plan is, this is not a good building to rent out. Yeah.
Oh, Mayor Angelo, you're back.
I'm on Trustee Caravas's computer. Mine's recharging. And I apologize. I concur with the rest of the Board of Trustees. I think, to me, if the gentleman was approved to use the sewer system, as far as I'm concerned, he's entitled to use the sewer system. And so it was a very, I think that you stated it much more eloquently, but I agree with all of you on waiving any fees.
Do we need a vote, or is, I mean, the consensus seems clear?
I was wondering that as well. If the town attorney could clarify, do we need to put this in a resolution form so it's in his record, or is just the minutes of this meeting sufficient?
I think we should have a vote on it, and then we could have a resolution ratifying the decision of the following meeting, if that's okay with the board. Just so there's a written paper trail.
Thank you.
Do you want to vote tonight, Brandon?
Yeah, we can vote tonight, and then we'll have a resolution at the following meeting on consent ratifying the decision.
Okay. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
And I think to clarify, I would be to give the sewer connection and
Pardon me?
Just so we know what we're voting on. I guess yes is to give it and no is to not. So
yes is to give the waiver, no is to not. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Yes.
Mayor Browning,
Yes.
Trustee Waugh,
Yes.
Trustee Rogan,
Yes.
Trustee Miller,
Yes.
and Trustee Caravas,
Yes.
and Trustee Lawson.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you want to continue with the agenda?
I thought the mayor was reconnecting to his computer. Okay.
He needs to recuse himself for this next one, so you're the man.
Oh, that's true. Okay, sorry. Okay. Would the clerk please read into the record the next item on the agenda?
Yes, the next item is discussion of repealing ordinance 1055.
Okay. Staff presentation on that, I guess, is town attorney going to do this, or the utilities director, or?
I had planned on doing it.
Oh, okay, utilities director Kaplan.
So the overview was that this ordinance was an ordinance that was passed that would start to require that all properties connecting to the town water system would require giving water rights to the town. Before this, it was only something that was listed in the section of the code with regard to annexation and to subdivisions. And at that time, there were concerns about the number of shares of CBT that the town had. And there may have been some confusion on what the actual IGA was listing as what we've now come to discuss in pretty good detail, pre-existing commitments. And so at that time, that ordinance was presented that would change the language of the code so that even properties within the town limits would be required to present water rights, or in most cases, that is a share of Colorado Big Thompson water. After the reviews that we've had and finding that we do have additional CBT shares, it has been mentioned whether we needed to continue on with having that portion of the code. We've reviewed and have seen that staff believes there are 5, sorry, I can't move my cursor and pull up my notes, but I believe it was 5 properties within town that look like they could be what are called these pre-existing commitments. So that has been pretty well defined now, or we've come up with what we believe that to be based on discussions with Longmont and discussions with the board in the past. The one caveat or one concern I had put out there was this idea of the Lions planning area. So the Lions planning area in the IGA was listed as the Lions service area was listed in the IGA for where Lions would serve water. And that's based on the town planning area. And that has changed over time. And so there are some complexities there. But the main concern or qualifier would be, are any properties outside of town able to be considered pre-existing commitments? So pre-existing commitments fell into 2 categories. One was this idea of a property that had a contractual obligation. At some point, the town said, we will give you a connection to the water system or something in return. The only place we've seen that is along Apple Valley. Some properties were given that contract to connect to the water in return for giving us an easement for our water main. The other way you could have a pre-existing commitment is if you were a property that was in town and we are saying now was zoned and was, don't have all of them. I wish I had my notes right in front of me. Hopefully you have that portion still in the notes. But, so we're pretty clear on those in town. So it really just comes down to whether or not properties outside of town could be pre-existing. And from my interpretations, it sounds like they wouldn't, because they were not zoned, they were not in town, so there would not have been an obligation to serve them water without them annexing in. And we have the regulations in the code that say if you annex in, you will provide a share or water rights. So as long as we're comfortable that precludes any properties, because if it doesn't, then we really want to look at all of those properties outside of town that might be in the planning area that could somehow be considered pre-existing commitments. And the UEB had previously expressed some concerns that were there any other anomalies out there or areas where we were not sure. But since that time, staff, myself have done some pretty in-depth research, and it doesn't appear to be just these properties in the Lions planning area, but outside of town. And that's my report.
Are there other questions of town staff on this? I have a couple. Aaron, in the potentially 5 pre-existing commitments, if I recall from discussions with you and the town clerk, there was one property out in Apple Valley that apparently signed an agreement and paid a tap fee and everything many years ago that had never been connected to the town water system, but I think plans to do so soon. Is that one accounted for in the 5 properties?
No, that would be a separate one that's not and is connected. They've actually just tapped in a couple weeks ago. But
Oh,
so
they
we
did?
will be giving a CBT share. We will be dedicating a share to Longmont for that property.
As to that property, tap fees were paid many years ago, and also the Apple Valley property owners actually put up water shares with the town that are included in the town's water share inventory now, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if that property did, but there was at some point something put up for the CBT shares.
Because the list shows a whole bunch of Apple Valley water shares being put up. So it's not like we waived water shares for the Apple Valley connections. I guess that's my
That
question.
property did dedicate a share of water several years ago.
Okay.
And then just sat there vacant for years until it just sold, and now they've built up there.
Okay. And then I have one question of the town attorney as well. And something I'm pretty sure I remember from our discussions from the prior board when we did ordinance 1055, but the reference in there to water shares being required for any subdivision. Is it correct that that doesn't include just what we typically think of as a new subdivision, like a Eagle Canyon or LVP or something, but it actually includes like an existing lot, like if one of these vacant lots in town should be split into two lots, as has happened occasionally, that triggers the subdivision requirement. And if you split your one lot into two, you'd have to put up one new water share. Is that your interpretation?
That's my interpretation.
Any other questions of town staff? Okay. Trustee Caravas?
Question I have is, of course, I sat on the UEB meetings where there are concerns, and thanks, Aaron, for all the research you said, or you did. I still have a concern about what the UEB was deciding, if there's just something out there, as the pro tem has indicated. But Aaron, and maybe this goes to Administrator Simonson and council, do you feel it'd be necessary to bolster the other areas of our code to make sure that any land brought into, by annexation or acquired, does not meet the pre-existing contract or commitments of the July 23rd, 2003 agreement with Longmont? So, and if you think maybe we should look at things to bolster, should we postpone voting on this at this time? Because I still have a slight, I guess, queasiness to, if we remove this and there's something out there we get caught with 5-10 years from now, I hate to see doing that to a future board. And I'd rather keep this on the books until if staff and council feel we need to bolster the rest of the areas of our code to make sure it clearly states the pre-existing commitments.
From my perspective, it would just be right if somehow it can be shown in the code that they could annex in and be considered pre-existing because they were in the Lions planning area. Again, it would seem like which comes first. If the annexation requirement to put up a share of water is first, then they were not considered to be a pre-existing commitment, because at the time this agreement was done, it was known that properties outside of town would need to annex in. Therefore, they would not be considered to be a commitment because we expected them to put up a share. So it seems like we should be okay, but again, not having the full legal background in there is.
I think it's pretty clear if they're not annexed into the property, they're not pre-existing. They don't fall in that exception, or they, we've already counted their water. And the code is perfectly clear that if you annex in, you need to bring water with you.
So basically, at this point, you feel the code, what you just said, is strong enough that if I want to annex in and I got property out east, that if I try to pull the wording that Aaron just said, that, well, I was in the planning area, so I shouldn't. You feel confident enough that someone tried to file something as a district court, we could easily say, no, it doesn't mean it. We're good.
And I think we should, they should look to this meeting where it's discussing it right now and saying that it's absolutely clear, and the board agrees that if you annex in, you need to bring water. There's no, I don't know how the town could have given people water or said they were part of the water, that was considered for the IGA if they weren't within the town at that time, even if they were in the Lions planning area. To me, the Lions service area was defined as the town of Lions and not the planning area.
Okay, thank you very much.
A follow-up question, doesn't the town code actually prohibit the town from providing utilities outside town limits?
Unless you annex. Yep.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see how there could be unknown pre-existing commitments when the code says we can't do it. So
yeah, so it was done ultra vires without authorization. If the former town administrator, 40 years ago said, "Oh yeah, when you come in, you have water waiting for you," that they did that without authority.
Yeah. Okay. I guess at this time I would entertain a motion, and I should say put on the record too, because we might have glossed over it. Mayor Angelo has recused himself from consideration of this item on the agenda, so that's why he's not here. So at this time I would entertain a motion. Anyone?
I will try to do that. At this time, I'll move for the repeal of ordinance 1055.
So I think at this time we're not moving to repeal it. We will need an ordinance, so we just need direction of staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think we just need a board to give staff direction on whether or not to draft an ordinance to repeal it, because you can only repeal an ordinance by another ordinance.
By ordinance. Okay. All right.
Never mind.
Okay, I guess then I would ask, there's 6 of us with the mayor recused, to one bit of further discussion too, as a board member who was here when we passed ordinance 1055 after much consideration and deliberation and advice and everything. And speaking for me as one of the board members then, the reason that we passed ordinance 1055 was we were told, based on the best information the town had available at the time, that we were down to roughly 2 water shares left in our inventory above those necessary to cover water commitments. And we did not have at that time a good count of how many potential pre-existing commitments or undeveloped lots there were. That information simply wasn't available to us. We knew that there were at least half a dozen or so at that time. If we only had 2 shares, what we were looking at as a board was as soon as we exhausted the 2 remaining excess shares in our inventory and the next application from a pre-existing property came in, we were going to have to go out in the market and buy CBT shares at $60,000 to $70,000 each. And that money was going to have to be paid by the ratepayers out of the town's water and wastewater fund. And that's what highly motivated us to basically change the town's longstanding policy of not requiring water shares for old properties in town, because we didn't think it was fair to shoulder the current ratepayers with basically buying water shares for the last half dozen plus properties that might be added onto the system. Since that time, as we've all discussed, the town, through the work of Utilities Director Kaplan and other staff members working with Longmont, it's been clarified that we actually have somewhere around 9 or 10 CBT shares left in our inventory, and maybe 5 properties left. I'm not even sure all those can be built on. So the emergency that existed and the potential of having to basically assess ratepayers for the cost of going out and buying water shares doesn't exist. And the town did without ordinance 1055 for a long time, for decades, as a matter of fact, and only changed it when it looked like we were going to run short on water shares. And now that it looks like, to give credit where credit was due, town boards and town administrators and staffs over the years, as it turns out, did a darn good job of planning for the future. And we do have enough water shares to cover our properties through build out. So for all those reasons, my direction would be to direct staff to prepare an ordinance repealing 1055. And I guess we should go one by one, and I'll just go by the order of the squares on my screen. Trustee Lowell, do you have thoughts on this?
No, I concur. Give them we'll work on the repeal.
Trustee Wall.
1055 was never necessary. It was rushed. It was tried many times to be passed under emergency ordinance and otherwise. It's not necessary now. It wasn't necessary then. It was poor bookkeeping at the time. And this is an issue that I've talked about many times before. So I'm glad to see 1055 go because it wasn't ever necessary.
Trustee Miller.
I concur with Trustee Waugh on that, 100%.
Trustee Caravas.
Yep, let's go ahead and repeal it.
And Trustee Wogan.
Yep, let's repeal it.
Wogan. Okay, I think the consensus and direction to staff is clear, and we'll do the actual vote perhaps on consent agenda when its ordinance is prepared and comes back before us. And I guess at this point, if somebody could notify the mayor if his computer's working again, that I'm more than willing to have him reassume his duties.
It will need to be an ordinance, so will it need a public hearing, right?
You'll need two readings, yeah.
Okay.
Public hearing on second reading.
I have to write it. Are we ready?
We can work together on it. It shouldn't be too hard.
Right, no.
Yeah.
Would anybody like to take a 5-minute break while we're waiting to get the mayor reset and all that? Would that make sense? Oh, he's back.
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break
Okay.
for everybody. I got my break.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead and start without me. I'm gonna have to tuck my son in real quick.
Madam Clerk, could you please read number 3 under general business into the record?
Yes, sir. Item 3 is direction to staff concerning written policy on process for considering an application for permission to dedicate Lake McIntosh shares.
Okay, we obviously had a workshop on it. Brandon, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
This is a reminder to the board, we're looking for direction to staff. Our plan is to finalize that policy with the additions we made during the workshop and promulgate that via resolution. In addition, Administrator Simons is going to work on an application kind of synthesizing, if you will, the policy into a form. So that's our next steps with the board's approval.
Okay, so you just need direction from the board to proceed to the resolution, and that's what we'll do at this time. What's the pleasure of the board? Mayor Pro Tem Browning?
I agree. The staff should proceed on the drafting the form and drafting the resolution as discussed at the workshop.
Trustee Wah?
I agree that we should move forward with the process. However, I don't think the process is significantly different from what we're doing now without looking at the definition of economic development more closely.
Trustee Rogan?
I agree. We should move forward.
Trustee Caravas?
You're on mute.
Yep.
Sir.
Let's move forward, please.
Trustee Lowell?
Yes, move forward.
Okay, Trustee Miller is putting her son to bed, which is what a mother should do. And I agree that we should move forward. So that's your direction, Counselor.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Discussion of future agenda items. Is there anybody that would wish to bring a future agenda item to our attention? Yes, sir.
I have two. Neither of them is urgent, but I did want to kind of put them in the hopper and also go on public record as these may be requested at some point in the future or may need to be heard. Both of these relate to some upcoming discussions that are anticipated to be had with Planet Bluegrass. The board appointed Trustee Rogan and I to a subcommittee to work along with staff on some issues that are outstanding there. And I think we have a meeting, I guess it's tomorrow afternoon, with staff to kind of as the first step in that. And these relate to issues that we anticipate sitting down and discussing with Planet Bluegrass. And if they're successfully resolved in our discussions, then there would be no need for either of these agenda items. If they're not, and we can't reach agreement, then it's something the board may want to consider at a later date. One of them would be to address and possibly amend the code definition of what a campsite is. It's pretty generally broadly defined in the lodging tax part of the code as it exists right now. And that has led to some differences between the town and Planet Bluegrass as to how exactly you determine what a campsite is and therefore how you calculate a lodging tax. That's something we plan to discuss with them and hope we can successfully resolve it and not have to move forward. But that's one possible agenda item, is potentially amending the code definition of campsite. And the second one is in the agreement, the main contract agreement between the town of Lyons and Planet Bluegrass that dates from 1999. So it's like 22 years old. And there are several things in there that need to be modernized, but one provision in there says that the Board of Trustees essentially has the right and the ability, if it sees fit, to step into the process for dealing with Planet Bluegrass, to basically deal with Planet Bluegrass directly if there's a need to do so. I don't see a need to do so right now. But again, whether there might be one in the future probably depends on whether we're able to come to a resolution of some of the issues that exist between the town and Planet Bluegrass. And those issues run two ways. I think there are some things that Planet Bluegrass would like to have amended in its favor in that agreement from the town. And then there's some issues the town needs to clarify with Planet Bluegrass. And I don't want to get into specifics tonight, but I just wanted to identify those two future agenda items as something that may be coming, but we hope we never have to take them up.
Any other requests for future agenda items by the trustees? Seeing none, we'll move on. Summary of action items.
All right, this is what I have. I've got, we need to update ordinance 1095 to include stormwater reference. Update resolution 2021-17 to reflect changes by trustee Caravas. We need to draft an ordinance to repeal ordinance 1055. We need to memorialize waiving the sewer tap fee for 622 Overlook Drive, and also draft a form and resolution for accepting Lake McIntosh shares.
Administrator Simonson. Any
The only
addition?
other addition is from our workshop where we're going to try to get some clarification on how mixed uses are taxed.
Thank you. Counselor?
Yeah, me working on a resolution to authorize condemnation for the Second Avenue Bridge project and also establishing a special meeting to pass that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
I move that we adjourn into executive session pursuant to CRS sections 24-6-4024E and 24-6-4024B for purposes of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators, and for receiving legal advice from attorneys representing the town on specific legal questions, and specifically determining negotiating positions and strategies regarding the town's energy cost savings contract with Honeywell International, Inc., and for the new wastewater treatment plant, and obtaining advice as needed from legal counsel on related legal issues. So that's a motion.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to enter into executive session. Can we have the vote, please?
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
and Trustee Miller.
Yay.
Okay, passes unanimously.
And I will go start the second Zoom link that I emailed you earlier.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. See you there.
Okay, so we're leaving this meeting, right? We're leaving this meeting?